What's up, guys?
What's up?
So today, you want to talk about what we're gonna talk about today?
So today we're talking about how we got ourselves prepared for being married. Being married is an important thing. It's important to go into marriage with an idea of how to be married and learning about your partner. Because like that person you're gonna be with, you're planning on being with them for the rest of your life. So there are certain things that you should do before you marry someone to kind of prepare yourselves and your relationship for marriage.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Let's go.
Let's go.
So initially, before we got married, I didn't really have like a roadmap or like a guideline I was going to follow in order to prepare for marriage. But I did know there were like certain questions that I wanted to ask my soon-to-be husband, just so I can know that we're on the page. Like, how do you want to raise your children? Do you want to go to church all the time? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in Jesus?
Good questions.
Those were like my main questions, because before I met Mark Anthony, I was at a point in my life where I didn't want to no longer date somebody who didn't have those three main things. Wanted kids, wanted to go to church, and believed in God and believed in Jesus. Those are like my main priority questions.
Yeah.
Besides having those questions answered and getting to know the other person, I really didn't have anything that I wanted to do or something that I looked forward to doing before getting married.
And see, I was kind of the opposite thing. I knew that marriage is a lot of work, and I felt that in my mind, it's better to get some type of like guidance and counseling before marriage than after marriage. Well, that you kind of get through all those different things out of the way and all those different questions, those hard questions, and any other issues you have before you get married. Get that stuff done first. Don't have to deal with it later. That way, it's no surprise or secret. Okay, well, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about that, because you're not going to think of every question to ask. So you have someone in your life who's married a lot of people who have helped in marriages, and I like to go to them as, hey, what are some things that you have experienced in other relationships that we could talk about in my relationship to make sure that's not an issue for us. So that was always something I wanted to do.
You wanted, I guess, mentors in a way before getting married?
Mentors and basically premarital counseling.
Premarital counseling.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
So we did go to the same church, so we already had a pastor that we wanted to marry us. Mm-hmm. So when we told the pastor that, was it before we got engaged?
It was.
Yeah, it was after we got engaged. Yeah, after Mark Anthony asked me to marry him, we spoke with the pastor and told him we were engaged, and he told us that in order for him to marry us, there was premarital counseling that he does with couples before marrying them.
Because it's a good idea.
And when he told us that, I was like, that makes sense.
Yes,
why not do it before instead of after? But initially, I never thought of that. I'm like, that's a real good idea, because you avoid a lot of things and you get to know the person more. So instead of doing it after, in between, doing it before, I was like, that's a real good idea.
Yeah. And even before that, into the idea of like what we did before we even talked to pastor, we were just sort of courting each other and heading towards that direction. We got a marriage book, and we kind of like went through that and talked about the different topics and questions that were in that book to kind of see, hey, are we even ready to even be engaged in the first place? To see, okay, is this person someone I want to marry? And going through that and going through the questions and all the books, okay, well, yeah, every question they had, things are lined up, things are pretty cool. So then after that, we got engaged, and then we talked to pastor.
Yeah, I forgot about that. When we were like seriously talking, Mark Anthony he brought us a book to read, and it was like His and Hers. I forgot the name of it. His and Hers. It was a His and Hers books.
It's basically the idea is that,
and
are you ready to be married? And it's basically, okay, well, for the male, as a male, these are all the different things that biblically you should be able to do to be married. A female, these are all the different things that marriage means for a female. And then it kind of comes together, okay, together, is your relationship ready for marriage? And because a lot of people, they rush into marriage, I just want to be married so I can have company, be married so I can have sex, but marriage is a very sacred thing, it's a very important thing. And to rush into it, it's just asking for things to go wrong. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I want us to be as prepared as possible before we get married, because that's going to prevent issues.
So we had that book actually completed before we actually started our first class with the pastor.
Yep.
In the premarital counseling that we had with the pastor, he went over certain things and questions with us, but then he also gave us a workbook that we worked through.
Mm-hmm.
And the workbook was very similar to the book that we had already read and completed. Because the book that he had, it was a regular textbook, but then at the back or in between, I can't remember, of the actual textbook, they had like questions.
It was like 100 questions.
Problem solving skills. So it was similar to the workbook that we had in the premarital counseling. So
and I think one of the reasons for that, if I remember correctly, is that one of the people that wrote the book that we read also wrote the workbook that we did with Pastor. So that's why it was kind of similar. It wasn't the exact same person, but he helped with it. It's like two people wrote the book we read, and then one of those wrote the book Pastor read. So it was kind of similar, but it was kind of cool because as we were going through the classes with the pastor, going through the books, they were like, hey, we already talked about that. Hey, we already did that too. So it kind of was like, it made the process a lot easier and simpler. Then we kind of like did a legwork ourselves. We didn't have to deal with any other things that have come up if we hadn't already done it. So with that aspect in mind, we want to give you guys some questions we had in those books that kind of like allowed us that are really good questions to ask your spouse or the person that you want to be your spouse, the person you're dating, to see if they're ready for marriage, if you're ready for marriage. Because it's not just about them, it's about you. You may be not ready for marriage, and you want to get married, but you're not ready to be married. So there's certain things you need to ask yourself and ask your potential partner to kind of like prepare you guys for marriage.
One question they had in there, it was, will you just allow your spouse to just shop whenever, or is it going to be a limit that you guys have on when to let the other person know you're going to purchase something?
Yeah.
I know I said that kind of weird, but like, for example, like you guys can agree that if you're going to purchase something that's over $300, you'll let your spouse know about it, so it's not a surprise.
$300 is a lot of money. Like, I would say less than that, but the idea is that when you look at marriages, majority of marriages fail because, number one, communication, number two, finances. Usually it's communication about finances. So financial questions are a big thing to ask.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Finances are a big thing to ask and talk about before you get married, before you get engaged, because you want to make sure you guys are on the same wavelengths. One thing with us is that I was a spender, she wasn't. So I'm the kind of person who, if I want to get something, I'm going to go buy it. I'll deal with the bills later. And then she's the kind of person, well, I won't buy anything because we got to pay all these bills. So we had to kind of discuss that. I can say, well, okay, what are our limits? So I know that, okay, if I want to get something, I like plan it out and say, well, okay, I'm going to go get this thing or go buy this thing. And I talk to her about it. That way it doesn't destroy our budget because I want to buy something. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, babe, go buy yourself something. Enjoy yourself. Don't be so whatever.
I'm still working on that. It's hard for me to spend money.
Yeah, like, spend money. I spend money. You spend money. Like, come on.
Yeah, so we came to an agreement. Like, if it's just something really expensive that's going to, like, be a surprise, just let us know. Like, probably, like, $100.
Basically, yeah.
Unless you're going grocery shopping. I know our grocery bill's going to be, like, around $1 or $2.
Yeah.
So that's not
if
a surprise.
But
like
for yourself,
if I see under my account $100 and it says WWE, I would be like, what was that?
No, but usually that if I was spending $100 on something, usually it would be like a game or something like that. But that's because, but it's rare like that because I budget my games and I get them to the point where they're almost free usually when I buy them. Because I think about it, I plan it ahead of time.
How are you guys going to spend holidays? Because now that you're married, you have two sets of families now. Your family and his family. Are you guys going to spend Christmas with just, the husband's family? Or are you guys going to do both, half and half? That's a conversation that has to be had, especially if you're a big family person, because you're going to have to learn how to share your time with both.
It's true, and families have their own family traditions. Like, not so much now, but when we were first started dating, it was tradition for everyone in my family to go to my grandma's house for Christmas. And we spent the night at my grandma's house, the night of Christmas, woke up Christmas morning, and did Christmas there. And then, so that was kind of like, okay, well, is that something we want to do? It just so happened that soon after we got married, we stopped doing that. So no one really does that now. So it kind of worked out. But at the time, it was expected of us to do that because that's what everyone did. Another big thing that I think that is an important thing to talk about is children and how many children you want to have and how you plan on raising your children. It seems like it's something you definitely should ask, but you'd be surprised how many times people just get together and just start dating and just like never really even get to that point where they're actually talking about how many kids they want to have. It's an important idea. Okay, well, do you want twins? Do you want 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids?
Twins.
Some people want twins. I'm like, some people that's the desire, heart's desire is to have twins. So those are conversations you need to have with someone to kind of know where their head's at. And then adding on to that, how are you going to raise your children as far as discipline? Who's going to be the disciplinarian? Are you guys both going to be really strong disciplinarians? Are you guys going to basically just rule your child, or are you going to like let your child be free and let your child do whatever? That's a big issue because if one parent is very strict, the other parent isn't, that can clash. But at the same time, you don't want both parents to be super strict and their child has no childhood. So you kind of have to have that conversation with your spouse ahead of time before you have children. How are you going to raise your children? That way you kind of work out those kinks. The last thing you want is to have a child with someone and then realize they were going to raise their child totally different than the way you want to raise your child, and then you guys have a bunch of conflict.
Which goes to religion. Are you going to raise your children Catholic, Baptist?
But see, religion is one of those things where you guys should be on the same wavelength for that in the first place. I feel
some people aren't,
but that goes back to the whole be on equally yoked type of thing. My only idea is that if you're a Christian, I think it's really important that you marry another Christian, because that way you guys already kind of have, like I said, the whole idea of we're going to raise our children in a Christian household. If you guys are Muslim, you guys are Jewish, you guys are Catholic, I think that it should be important that you guys are in the same religion. That way there's no conflict in that. If you guys aren't in the same religion and you guys don't care, that's fine. That's fine as well.
When you go to raise your child.
But on the is that, okay, what do you want your child to do? You may have one parent that's like, okay, well, I don't want my child to be Catholic. I don't want my child to be Jewish. And the other parent is like, well, my child has to be Catholic. My child has to be Jewish. So you have to have those conversations. Even if you're okay with your spouse not necessarily following your religion, are you okay with your child not following your religion? So those are conversations that you have to have before you even get to that point of marriage and then having children. The thing you guys talk about is your friend groups. A lot of times you have your own set of friends and you have people who want to go out with their friends, and you need to talk about the idea, okay, well, what is it okay? How late am I able to stay out with my friends? Like if I want to go out and hang out with my guys, or you want to hang out with your girls, okay, can I call you, let you know, hey, I'm coming home at 12, 1? There's certain limits to that, and you need to talk about those things. Because if you have your own social life before you get marriage changes that. And the idea that you can't live your life as you're single when you're married. So you need to have that conversation. Hey, well, these are my friends. Introduce your spouse to your friends. Hey, all right, well, we're going to go out this day. We're going to go out that day. You're going to have those conversations before you get married. That way it's not an issue of like your spouse be like, oh, you can't go out with your guys because I want to spend time with you tonight or whatever. You have to have those conversations ahead of time. Another big thing you guys can talk about is your gender roles. That's a really important thing, because if you have one spouse that, like, if you have a female who basically feels that they should be the person that cooks and cleans and takes care of the children, and the male doesn't think that could be a clash. Or the other way around, when you feel like you have some males who like, well, your job is to be in the kitchen and be taking care of my child, and then wife may want to be an entrepreneur, may want to have her own job. That could be a clash there. So you guys kind of need to talk through, okay, well, what are you going to do in the relationship? What am I going to do in the relationship? Okay, who's cooking, who's cleaning, who's taking care of children, who's doing all those things. That way you kind of work out those kinks, because living on your own or living with your parents is totally different than living with a spouse. It's a totally different ballgame. So you got to have to like work out those kinks ahead of time as far as how you're going to run your household before you guys move in together. That way it's less conflict and less issues once you actually get married and then eventually move in together.
The thing that we did outside of counseling, they did touch on this a little bit, was budgeting and how much you guys will be spending every month, and seeing who will contribute to what and who's going to pay the bills, and basically how much each other makes, and are you going to be okay with someone making more or someone making less. You have to talk about that, because once you're in marriage, you're going to have to start paying bills. You don't want that conversation to happen after you pay the bills. And if someone gets upset, or you have unset expectations where you expect the other person to just pay all of the bills and you keep your money, those conversations are really important to have before marriage.
And see, I've always been in the vein that once you're in marriage, that there is no more my money, it's our money. So whatever I make, I consider it part of her money. Whatever she makes is part of my money. Some couples are like, okay, well, what I came in here with is what I have. So they have their own separate bank accounts, they have a joint account, but they have separate accounts as well. And then their money goes whatever. And they're like, well, you got to figure out your end because I already paid the bills I'm paying today. I'm not paying more bills. Like, I think that it should be together in unison, and everything is one big pot of money.
But some people are different. Some people may even split bills. Like, these are your bills, and then these are my bills.
And those are the conversations you need to have. Because I know that when we got married, if that's what she wanted to do, it would have been an issue with me. One of them is that, no, this is ours together. And I've never liked the idea of having separate bank accounts because that could cause a bunch of other issues and a bunch of other stuff I don't feel like getting into right now.
And then if you have that conversation before, you can decide, hey, this may not be the person I want to marry.
Exactly. So yeah,
that's why it's really important to have it before you get married.
Yeah.
Another question they ask and that we talk about during premarital counseling is past trauma and how you were raised as a child. You may not understand or know that it will affect your marriage, but it will. And if you have unresolved trauma and issues from the past, it will affect, how you engage with your spouse. It will affect how you argue with your spouse and how you communicate with your spouse. Even if they're not affecting you now and you've worked through it, it's something that your spouse needs to know.
True. Very true.
So that will be talked about. And I think that's really important.
The big thing is how you guys are going to deal with when you guys have arguments and disagreements. Some people fight horribly. They yell and they scream, and some people cower and meek away when they get upset. It's important to kind of know how your spouse deals with pressure and deals with being angry before you get married, because you can have a spouse that gets angry and starts hitting stuff and throwing stuff, and if you never made them mad before you got married,
you'll never
and
know.
You got married, and then that happens. Whoa! I don't want to be married to someone who does that, and you never would have known. That's how they do when they get mad. So those are important things that need to come up before you get married. I'm not saying make your significant other mad, but you have to have those conversations that will kind of bring that up and say, hey, well, how do you deal with being upset? How do you deal with being angry? How do you deal with when you're mad, when you're sad? How do I get you out of that mindset? If you're upset, do you want me to come to you? Do you want me to leave you alone? How do you deal with that? Those are conversations you need to have that way you know, because the last thing you want to happen is to get married to someone and not know how to handle them when they get out of themselves.
Or have you guys ever had an argument?
Yeah.
You guys need to have an argument or a heated discussion before you get married.
Exactly, it's true. At least one or two heated discussions, because that will really show you how that person acts. Because even if you go through the questions and ask them, how do you react when you're upset, they may not actually show you how they react. They may just put on Bruce space. Well,
and when we first started talking, like, everything was great, happy-go-lucky, and we're pretty calm, easygoing people. So we never initially had an argument. So it was kind of surprising, but then again, on the edge, hey, you guys need to have a heated discussion. So I remember one night, Mark Anthony was at my house, and he purposely did this. I guess he wanted to see how I was going to react.
I remember this. I totally forgot about that.
He had a message on his cell phone from a girl sitting right there openly on his lap.
Yeah, I remember this.
And I was sitting there laying on him, and I see the message. I'm like, why is she messaging you? Who is that? What are you doing? Seriously, what?
See, that's what I'm saying.
But he had did it on purpose because he wanted to see how I would react.
Exactly. You gotta bring that stuff up.
I got mad. I mean, I got mad, but when I get mad, I don't yell and get angry. And he kind of saw that. I got mad, but I was myself.
Quiet when you get mad. Because of that, I know how she.
Yeah, he was able to see how I
know when she's upset. I've seen that. I know what it is. So I was like, okay, well, now I know how you act when you're upset. So let me let you know what's going on. I did this on purpose. Hey, we're cool. It's chill. There's nothing going on there. So yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh. But it was a good thing.
It was a good thing because it was needed. I'm like, okay, I gotta figure out some way to get you upset, so I know how you act when you're upset. So I totally forgot I did that. Huh,
Yeah.
see?
I remember that. That was
There
funny.
you go.
I mean, it wasn't funny in the moment. But...
Well, funny in the moment, but it was something to look back on because it was an important thing that's needed. You have to see your partner upset and mad before you get married, and you just have to. It's a necessity. One thing you guys need to talk about is a big topic is sex and sexual things when you get married because you guys may have different ideas of what you want or what you expect out of your spouse. So you guys need to discuss that and talk about that.
They do ask that.
Yeah. If your partner and you have different sexual drives, that can cause issue. That can lead to infidelity. That can lead to a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So you guys need to talk about, okay, well, what do you want? What do you want? Okay, well, but keeping it kosher, keeping it kind of like closed up because you don't want to go too far into it where you feel led into temptation. But at the same time, you need to have conversations about what you guys expect out of each other before you get married. That way you would know when you get married what
they have an idea. What the other person's thinking.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm really happy that we ended up doing the premarital counseling. If I had to do it over again, I would do it the same way before I got married. And I would just recommend that to anybody who wants to get married. Go ahead and do premarital counseling before, just so you know what you're getting into. And then it avoids a lot. There was a percentage that the pastor told us, if you do premarital counseling before, your chance of getting divorced drops like a lot. Like it just goes all the way down. Like you
mainly because if you look at the issues that are causing divorces or why divorces happen, a lot of those issues can be persuaded through premarital counseling.
Advocate for premarital counseling.
Yes, we definitely are.
So do premarital counseling before you get married, while you're engaged, maybe even while you're courting. Like read a book like we did, and then do the premarital counseling once you're engaged.
Mother is that it's always better to do groundwork first. Mother is that the more work you do before you're married, the less work you'll have to do once you are married. A lot of the issues and hurdles you may come up in your marriage will come out, but if you dig up those hurdles and you pull those skeletons out of the closet before you get married and you take all your baggage and you put it on the table and say, this is what I have before you get married, there's less surprises when you are married. And then once you are married, those surprises then is how, okay, well, do I stay with this person? Do I break up with this person? Do I get divorced? It's a lot easier to break up with your boyfriend than to divorce your husband or your wife. So you want to get those deal breaker things out of the way first before you even get married. And you do that by asking questions. And you may not know every question to ask. And that's why it's important to get a pre-marriage book and go through premarital counseling because I guarantee they're going to have questions that you never thought about asking.
Yeah.
And topics are going to come up that you never thought would come up. And you guys need to have those conversations.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of questions out there that we didn't even discuss today that may come up in your marriage because every marriage is different. Every book is different. Every teacher is different. So, like I said, don't just you say, okay, well, I watched that video, I'll ask these questions. No, do your research. Go into marriage being prepared. Being prepared is the best thing possible.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Comment any questions.
Like.
Subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video.
Yes. Bye, guys. We'll see you later.
Bye.